Hello everyone, welcome back to BlenderDiplom.com. This is Gottfried Karl Heinrich Hofmann speaking, and this time I'm gonna demonstrate the new fluid particles in Blender 2.57, which has just been released. It's a very simple setup, we're not gonna change a lot, but it's still a pretty cool result. And here's the overview. We got text, and the text is a mesh that's a collision object. We got a plane, and if you take a look at it, it's slightly going downwards, so the particles can flow downwards. The particles are emitted by two planes, and those are actually two particle systems, which are interacting thanks to a fluid interaction. And here are the two spheres we're gonna use as duplicate objects for the particle system. So there's no tessellation yet, which means you won't have realistic fluid, but you can still use the particle system to um, create a fluid system. And later on, when we got tessellation, we'll have this as real fluid. For now, we have to take the stylized approach with spheres, which also looks pretty cool and is probably something for the MoGraph guys. And yeah, actually that's it. Two emitters, one plane, collision objects, and a lot of fun, so let's go. So here we go again. I've set up a very simple scene, and from here we're gonna create the particle system and all the flow stuff. This is just a simple Blender text object, and this is another text object. So they are both separate from each other. And yeah, nothing special. The only thing I gotta note is that I've added a little bit of bevel. And this will be very important later on when we're gonna use the bevel to create the outline around the text for better readability. And the world setting is also very simple. I'm using only environment lighting from the sky texture, which is a rather grayish color. And I guess I'll choose the 720p render preset for the final result. Now, yeah, let's get started. And first let's add a plane and rotate it 90 degrees. So hit RX 90. And I'm gonna hit 3 to see where it's added, and yeah, it's down there, so let's move it upwards. And maybe here, and SX to scale it. And something you also might want to do is you might want to scale it on the Z-axis too, so it's getting so it's just very small. And now let's move it downwards until it's nearly touching the bottom, and then Shift D, duplicate it, and another one here. And I guess those can be a little tighter together. And now let's start giving it materials. Call this plane.red and give it the very same material as the Blender logo has, and it's just a diffuse texture, diffuse material with not much added. And now the very same thing for the other plane. This is gonna be a gray one. So I've also set up the gray material that's used for the diplom. And now we're about finished with this setup. And now let's add a simple particle system. Yeah, the emission 1000 is okay, and let's have it start at 1 and end at 100, and let's see what's happening. And yeah, first thing, we want to add a collision to the plane and give it a little bit of damping so that the particles don't bounce too much, and yeah, maybe also a little friction, but only very little. So 0.01 might be okay. And they're somewhat moving, but not as we might expect them or want them, and that's because our little setup is still flat. So let's select A and A twice, select everything, and now let's hit R and rotate it a little bit. So I guess this should be enough. And now when we watch the particles, they're moving. One thing to note though is that they're not yet fluid. And you might want to have asked, what's this fluid particle stuff all about? Well, it's very easy to find it. Just go to the particle settings, and down there under physics there is a new tab that's called fluid. And voila, we got fluid particles. But we need to set up a few other things. First of all, put the cache frame die size to 1, because these fluid particles need a lot of calculations, and so interpolation won't work so much. If we don't set this to 1 but bigger, we'll get weird results we might not want. Then I don't care for rotation in this case. And now let's check the physics. We got a size and a mass, and we really need this. Put the size up to 0.1, 0.1. And this is the size of them, and the size is also the radius, the interaction radius. So this comes in very handy, and we got a mass, and we should check multiply mass with size. And also size deflect. This means that they are, this is for collision stuff. And now the size is used also for the collisions of the particles in between. And this is also very important. And yeah, let's just see how this is looking without changing any of the other settings. And yeah, we got some fluid, but it's not going very far. And that's because our lifetime is way too low. Set it up to 500. And then check things out once again. And yeah, we got fluid creeping down. And the next thing I do is set this up to 5000. And I guess that's all we need. Oh, see these effects here? These explosion-like effects. You will encounter them very often. And the first thing you should do when you encounter those explosions is increase the number of subframes. That's calculations done in between frame steps, and those will make the simulation stable again, but of course the simulation will also take longer to compute. And yeah, we got quite a bit of fluid dripping down, and it should soon reach the blender. Very, very slow unfortunately, but yeah, there's another thing to note, and that's we forgot to add collision to the blender. So let's do this right now. And ooh, no physics? You can just use force fields, no collision? Well, that's because it's still a text object, and we need to change it to a mesh. So hit Alt-C and choose Mesh from Curve. And the same thing for the diplom, Alt-C, Mesh from Curve. And now you can add a collision to it. And just use damping, but no friction for both of them. Collision, damping, but no friction. And now when we play the simulation, it should work, but let's do first something else, and that's change a little bit here so we can free the cache. And now let's see what's happening when we are running the simulation once again. Unfortunately, this is really taking a while. So yeah, maybe I will pause the render, and you can see what's happening once the particles are reaching the blender. Oh, by the way, about the stuff here. We got a lot of properties here in the physics panel for the fluid, but I won't talk about most of those because those are rather special ones, and those will be the subject of further tutorials and also documentation on the wiki and stuff, so stay tuned. What I'm gonna show you though is how to use the fluid interaction down here. And now let's see what's happening when we're reaching the blender. And yeah, it's interacting and it's starting to float around the fonts. Very cool, right? And yeah, something to note, the only one property I changed for my animation, for the final animation you've seen, is the stiffness. Because that just says how incompressible this is, the fluid. And by reducing the stiffness, you can get a bouncing effect of the fluid, so you'll get a little better movement up there. And of course, the simulation will also be a lot more stable when the fluid ain't such stiff, so I'll put it to 0.5, and yeah, that's it about the fluid settings so far. Now let's add here also a particle system, and the cool thing is we can choose the very same settings as on the red one, so let's give those settings a good name, particle settings dot red. And now here we can choose the particle settings dot red. Click this, so it becomes a single user, and let's call it particle settings dot gray. And see, we got 5000, it's already fluid particles are set up. And now let's see what's happening when we are playing back the animation. And what I'd like to check out is how it's looking up here. And yeah, see, the fluids ain't mixing, they're overlapping. And this is something you can easily fix by creating a multi-fluid interaction. And that's why I've named those planes plane.red and plane.gray. To start to add a fluid interaction, we just need to add an object, and of course it should be the other object. So if I'm selecting the red plane, we should add the gray object, and this one has a particle system. It chooses the first particle system on the stack, and since we only got one, it will of course choose the one that we got here. And now here, let's also add the red one, and the particle system is also perfect. And now when we are starting the animation, things should behave a little differently. Oh, wait a moment. The cache step size is set to 10. It needs to be 1. So let's run this again. And here, around here, let's see what's happening. And yeah, the fluid ain't overlapping anymore, but it's mixing. Pretty cool, right? So, next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add 2 icospheres. So we got cool balls for our particle system. Add mesh icosphere, set the shading to smooth, and don't scale it. Keep it at exactly 1 the size. Move it there, and also give it the red material, and I'll call it icosphere.red. And now let's duplicate it. This one will got the material.gray, and it will be the icosphere.gray. And now we can use these as objects for our particle systems. So let's go down to render. Don't render the emitter and choose object. And let's choose the icosphere.red as dupli object. And now the cool thing is the size will be inherited from our settings for the physics. So it's already perfect. And this size is relative to the size of your sphere. So if we scale the sphere, those will also become bigger, and you can only get the perfect size or the absolutely correct size if you keep the size here at 1. So let's do the same thing for the gray one too. Object icosphere.gray. And now we can see what's happening when we're moving downwards to the Blender and the Diplom. Yeah, this time I'm really gonna pause. So I baked the animation and took a cool frame. And now let's see what's happening when we are rendering. And yeah, big problem, we can't really read the logo anymore because the red part here has the same red as the balls, and same goes for the gray part, which of course is very bad when you're doing logos and stuff. So, well, I thought I could easily fix this by adding a reflection to both of these fonts, because they will reflect the gray of the sky. So let's see what's happening. But first we need to make a single user copy on those fonts, because otherwise the balls would also start to reflect, and we'd be at the same point as we started with. No really effect, it would still be unreadable. So yeah, those two materials are now single users, and let's add a simple mirror with 0.3 reflectivity. Mirror 0.3. And now let's see what's happening. Oh, unfortunately the ray builds a little because of all those balls, but yeah, here we go, and we can read it inside where the balls are, but it's a little unreadable now in the background plane, because yeah, it's gray on gray, so yeah, this didn't really help out. But we can fix this by reducing the grayish reflection to the outline of the font. And how can you do this? Well, I came up with the following technique. Select the background plane, then I'm going to side view by hitting numpad 3. I'm duplicating it by using Shift D and moving the duplicate up just above the camera, and I'm giving it a solid black material, which will basically mean that it will reflect black, and this will mean the font will reflect nothing, but the rim will reflect the stuff from around the world. And now let's see how this is looking. We should get a pretty decent, yeah, here, perfect. A perfect outline for our font. And I hope things go well. Oh no, we still need to change it a little bit, and that's scale the plane up along the y-axis just a little bit. So this should be enough, and now let's see. I'm hoping we'll get a perfect outline. And yeah, it's there, and let's see what's happening with the outer parts. Oh, still not big enough. So this time should be perfect. Yeah, and well, of course this took me a while to figure out how to create this cool edge effect or rim effect here, and after I finished this, I showed it to my girlfriend and said, "Hey, cool, look, this is looking pretty cool, right?" And she asked me, "Why didn't you switch the colors of the balls so that the red balls are around the black Diplom and the black balls are around the red Blender, so you can see them, and the logo will pop anyways, even without the rim?" And I said, "Oh," and yeah, that's it. The logo still is now red on red and black on black with the rim, but I guess sometimes the simpler ideas are just way better. So this is it for our tutorial, maybe visit BlenderDiplom.com or hit me up on Facebook or follow me on Twitter, and of course, happy 2.57. Bye.